U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio said the United States is not forcing Ukraine into any agreement to end the war with Russia, rejecting claims that Washington is pressuring Kyiv. Rubio made the remarks while addressing a press conference on December 19th, where he spoke at length about U.S. diplomatic efforts. His comments came amid reports suggesting that envoys linked to President Donald Trump are pressuring Ukraine to compromise in order to stop the fighting. Under the reported plans, the United States would offer security guarantees to Ukraine, but Kyiv will have to agree to cede territory to Russia. Rubio pushed back on those claims, saying the narrative that the U.S. is trying to force Ukraine into a deal is, in his words, silly.
He said he was willing to end the war in Ukraine based on principles he had outlined last summer, and that included a complete Ukrainian withdrawal from 4 regions, most of which are not occupied by Russia, recognition of occupied Russian territory in Ukraine, and the complete lifting of sanctions. That goes beyond some of the recent conversations you've been having. So do you think Putin is serious about peace, and is the U.S. willing to recognize occupied Russian territory in Ukraine?
Look, I think ultimately there is what people say, and I'm not claiming that that's not his position. I'm just saying there's what people say and then what people do. In the end, we're not going to base our approach to finding peace here on the basis simply of what people are saying. We're going to base it on what people are willing to agree to, what countries are willing to agree to. Our role is very simple. We try to understand what the Russian position, how much can they give and what do they have to have. We understand the Ukrainian position, and we try to find whether those two things can overlap. Maybe that happens this week. Maybe that happens next month. Maybe that's not ready for a few months. That's not up to us. That's up to the two sides. In the end, it's up to them to make a deal. We can't force Ukraine to make a deal. We can't force Russia to make a deal. They have to want to make a deal. The role we're trying to play is a role of figuring out whether there's any overlap here that they can agree to. And that's what we've invested a lot of time and energy and continue to do so. That may not be possible. I hope it is. I hope it can get done this month before the end of the year. I want it to end as soon as possible. I know the president is deeply committed to helping it end. I know this, though. We're the only ones that can do it. If we were not involved, no one would be talking to both sides. The UN can't do it, but who else is going to do it? Nobody in Europe can do it. So I think the one thing people should have is an expression of gratitude that President Trump is willing to continue to engage in this, despite the fact that we haven't yet gotten the outcome that he hopes to have, because no one else could do it. And so that's what we're trying to do here. So this whole narrative that we're trying to force something on Ukraine is silly. We can't for it. There's no peace deal that Ukraine. There is no peace deal unless Ukraine agrees to it. But there's also no peace deal unless Russia agrees to it. We are just trying to find whether there's common ground that we can make happen. And maybe that's not possible. Maybe it is. Maybe that's not possible right now. But we don't think our work could potentially serve as a baseline for that in the future. Maybe it is possible now. We're going to continue to test it and see where we can get to.
Is the U.S. willing to recognize occupied territory?
I'm not going to speak on any specifics of any deal because we're not going to be able to negotiate a peace deal, especially one like this, in the media. Suffice it to say, let me just put it to you this way. There can't be a peace deal unless Ukraine agrees to it. And there can't be a peace deal, of course, unless Russia agrees to. But remember that. Any peace deal is one that Ukraine has to agree to because they're a combatant. If Ukraine says we don't agree to it, there won't be peace. So our job is not to force anything on anyone. It is to try to figure out if we can nudge both sides to a common place. And guys, in a conflict like this, in a war like this, that's not easy. It takes a lot of time. We're going to have some patience with it, unfortunately. There's a reason why this war hasn't ended, and that is because there's complex factors at play. I know that sounds like a throwaway line, but it's true. What we have tried to do in this entire process, and let's be clear about this. I mean, the United States is engaged in this. The president says this, and I'll translate what I think he's trying to say to you in all of this, and I think he's been pretty clear about it, is it's not our war. It's a war in another continent. We have equities, we have engagement in this war, but it's not our war per se. But we have been told by everybody, I think everybody would agree, that there's only one nation on earth, there's only one entity on earth that can actually talk to both sides and figure out whether there's a way to end this war peacefully. And that's the United States. And we've invested a lot of time, a lot of energy at the highest levels of our government. I believe, President Trump has had more meetings with foreign leaders and others on the war in Ukraine than on any other subject, including trade. He's invested a lot of time. Steve and Jared have invested time. I've invested time. The vice president, the Secretary of War, others, Secretary of Treasury, and more have invested a tremendous amount of time and energy in this. And what we're trying to figure out here is what can Ukraine live with and what can Russia live with, sort of identify what both sides' positions are and see if we can sort of drive them towards each other to some agreement. Wars end generally in one of two ways. Surrender by one side for another or a negotiated settlement. We don't see surrender anytime in the near future by either side, and so only a negotiated settlement gives us the opportunity to end this war. A negotiated settlement requires two things: both sides to get something out of it, and both sides to give something. And we're trying to figure out what can Russia give and what do they expect to get, what can Ukraine give and what can Ukraine expect to get. In the end, the decision will be up to Ukraine and up to Russia. It will not be up to the United States. So that's the role we are trying to play in this. And that's why you see so many meetings going on. This is not about imposing a deal on anybody. It is about determining what both sides expect and need to have and what both sides are prepared to give in return for it, and figuring out whether we can have those two overlap. And of course, that takes a lot of time and a lot of hard work. It can't generally be done in the media or in press conferences. I think we've made progress, but we have ways to go. And obviously, the hardest issues are always the last issues.
Earlier this month, U.S. envoy Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner met Ukraine's top negotiator Rustem Umerov in Miami without European involvement. The envoys also traveled to Moscow to discuss the proposed plan with President Vladimir Putin, who refused to make any compromises. Putin again ruled out concessions just ahead of the Miami talks, reinforcing Russia's hardline position. He criticized Ukraine as being the main obstacle to peace, accusing Kyiv of refusing to give up territory. Putin also boasted Russian military advances on the front lines during his 4-hour-long end-of-year press conference on December 19th. Meanwhile, Ukraine is seeking to secure funding to sustain its war effort through 2026, despite Trump's push to end the war. On December 19th, European Union leaders agreed to sign a deal to provide Ukraine with a €90 billion loan. However, the European Union failed to agree on using frozen Russian assets to finance Ukraine's needs.